Thank you, Salim. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Emirates Foundation Youth Philanthropy Summit, and welcome to our panelists who are just joining me on stage now. Thank you so much to Carlos for a great context setting, and certainly for connecting us even to the US election. Very interesting to hear that perhaps polls are now a thing of the past, and data can indeed give us much more accurate readings of what's happening. It's certainly something that we're going to be touching on throughout the next 2 days. How exactly can we use data? Should we be deploying it more effectively? How can we ride this digital revolution and really apply that to philanthropy and to social impact, to how we do our own work? I spent yesterday talking to members of the Arab Foundations Forum, which an organization which we chair, and we were talking about some of our programs, and an interesting point came up that sometimes our programs don't work, sometimes youth are not engaged because it's not what they want. And I think that really is the opportunity for us in the next 2 days to figure out how does data help us understand in the philanthropic sector what people want. Clearly, if we can respond to the market and take a market-based approach, it's likely that we will have more impactful programs. So I hope in the coming 2 days we have a brilliant opportunity to share ideas, to share insights, and to really come up with some tangible examples of how we can change the way we do philanthropy in line with this amazing opportunity that we have to navigate the digital revolution. Delighted to have here with me today 4 amazing panelists who are going to share their insights on exactly how their organizations are dealing with data from both the business sector and, of course, from the academic sector, and really looking to see how we can, as philanthropists, learn from your collective experiences and see what is the application in terms of rendering philanthropy more impactful. Before we do that, we ourselves, just like the US population, are going to take a vote, perhaps a slightly less controversial one, and I'm hoping it will appear shortly on our screen. The question we'd like to ask you, and I think you all have the opportunity here to respond via your app, so I do hope you've all signed up to the Emirates Foundation app for the forum. So the question we'd like to ask you, in order to test the resonance of our panel, is: will big data transform the way we make decisions to the philanthropic sector in the coming 2 years? I'm hoping we can also get the question on the screen shortly, and that technology is not failing us on a digital revolution conference. But I hope those of you that have the app will go there now and respond to that question, and we'll come back to that in a couple of minutes with the answers. So I'd also, do we have the answers to the poll? No, we don't. Okay. So I'm going to go straight then into our discussions today, and then shortly share with you. So you do have it on your app now. Hopefully we'll get the answer, disagree, or agree in a couple of minutes. Let's look then, first of all, I'd like to start with the corporate sector. I think perhaps the corporate sector has been ahead of the curve in terms of really understanding how data can predict future trends. We have with us today Raida from our partners at C2HM Hill, and I think Raida, you and I had a discussion about how you, as a large conglomerate working in different sectors, from oil and gas to construction, have been doing this for some time now and have some real examples of how that's helped you, I'm assuming, improve operational efficiency and perhaps investment opportunities, and generally the way you interact with the community. Tell us more about your experiences.
Thank you, Claire. So you mentioned insights, and we're seeing in the last year that companies that use data are insight-driven companies. So if you look at the data in itself, it's useless. But if you look for the right data, that's what you want. There is also designing to collect the right data, so you can actually better plan for your projects. And we work largely with big clients and cities all over the world. So one of the things that we've done in terms of using data analytics to better the services that are offered by cities is in Los Angeles. So you look at the commuter trends, usually in transportation, let's say. You look at congestion, and you plan for congestion on the roads. But if you look at the commuter trends and the behaviors of people and how they commute, over the span of a week, not necessarily in times of high use of roads, you can actually plan intelligently for your transportation network systems. So rather using the traditional models, cities are empowered now to know how to plan for transportation. Another trend that we're using now is analyzing utilities demands. So how do cities plan better for the utility consumption by its people? So, we always see that, the electricity grid requires this much amount of energy to be able to cater to all the city's needs, but there are trends of consumption. And now with solar energy coming into play and with people being able to generate their own energy and put it back in the grid, there's a challenge that energy is lost if your grid is full. So how do you actually manage your grid better to allow for energy integration produced by solar energy in houses? So we're seeing that. Yesterday, for some of you who were at the opening of ADIPEC, Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber talks about data and the oil sector and how that becomes more efficient. So whether you reduce down the cost of operational cost of producing a barrel, or the way you capture carbon CO2 from emissions. So data is becoming an integral part of how we provide services to clients. And the other thing that we look at is really empowering our clients with real data or near real-time data for making decisions. And we do that through deploying sensors with partners from the technology sectors. A simple light pole in a street can actually gather data regarding CO2 emissions, regarding rainfall, regarding fog, regarding number of cars on that road. And that information is transmitted to a dashboard or a central command center where the city operators can look at that data and analyze trends. So it will be able for them to be able to see any anomalies that happen, on the roads or in the environment or even in water quality, because we all know these things are very vital for cities. So the idea is, how do you look for the right data in real time, but also how do you design to collect the right data? And that's really important. And that's what we're helping cities with, is we sit with officials and ask them what they want to know, and that's how we design for the collection of data. So if you look now, Dubai wants to be the happiest city in the world. And how they're collecting that data is, if you go to any service, you see the smiley faces, and you pick. If you're happy with the service, you pick a smiley face. It's very simple. But when you analyze that data, it gives you the level of satisfaction for a service. And if there's no satisfaction, that means that service needs improvement or that infrastructure needs improvement. So that's how we go about with our clients to use big data in managing a city.
Thanks, Rada. So it's really underpinning all of your operations across the board. And I want to come back and ask you later around how you encourage your employees to run with that, change the mindset, because I think some of the discussions we were having yesterday with our fellow foundations, we have a tendency to surmise around what the market wants, and it's kind of a step change to ensure that everything you do is really driven by, it's evidence-based. We do have the results of our vote up now, so already the vast majority of you agree that data is going to be transformative in the philanthropic sector. So that's a great start, and hopefully we can look at that in the coming days and translate that into actual actions. Before I come to Yusuf, who also has great examples of Jumeirah Group and how they deploy data to look at trends and essentially define their future business strategy, just want to play you a short video, which I think really summarizes how the market is changing in terms of engagement with clients, and what that means in terms of data. If we can pull up the video, please.
Could this bottle actually be harmful?
Forced labor, dangerous environments.
People trust companies less and less. They do not believe companies. They do not believe CEOs. They do not believe advertisements.
Corporations made a mess, and they covered it up with these slick advertising campaigns. People started seeing the reality behind these images.
Companies are becoming more and more transparent, whether they like it or not.
There are 2.5 billion searches conducted on Google every day. There is more video uploaded to YouTube in a month than the major TV networks broadcast in the last 60 years.
Traditional advertising, I think, is finished. You would think that companies knowing their products are being reviewed and talked about would encourage them to make better products.
Being a great company is the new brand.
The definition of advertising has to evolve. Companies have to shift away from just saying they're great to actually being great.
Image is reality. What you see is what you get.
Rather than spend a lot of money on paid advertising, instead let's take most of that money and invest it into customer experience.
Let's create a platform so that our consumers can bring to life what they want and their passion. People would hug me. I've never been hugged for any work that I've ever done I barely get hugged at home.
We all know the planet is under pressure. One company is not going to change it. It needs to be many companies, and we can start a movement, get more companies on board. Yes, we can have a very meaningful impact on the planet.
The best merchants are the ones who dictate the future, not the ones who are trying to predict the future.
To the skeptics, continue to be skeptics, because I'm going to go change business. You guys do what you want to do, but I see the future.
So Naked Brand is a documentary that came out talking about essentially the end of traditional advertising, talking about how this digital revolution has driven such a level of transparency that corporates can no longer simply push out messages. They have to be listening, they have to be responding to what their customers are telling them. And I think there's a lot here for us to learn also in the philanthropic sector, how we understand market data and how it relates to our program. So instead of us surmising what people need, what our beneficiaries want, really listening to them and ensuring that the information we're getting from them is factored into our business. Yusuf, you were telling me that in the hospitality sector, this is actually, in a way, you've been doing this for a long time, that using data to, rather than put out messaging to your customers, is to understand what do they want and then recalibrate your business strategy around that. Share with us a bit more about how you do that.
It's very interesting for us. I mean, as a hospitality business, almost every aspect, almost every transaction we have is documented and recorded for the most part electronically. So if somebody comes to make a reservation, if they stay in a hotel, if they have a meal, no matter what transaction they have with us, it's a transaction that's captured and it's a transaction that's measured. And what we've really gotten a lot better at over the last few years is seeing how can we turn that data into genuine insights. So today, for me as a hotel marketer, I can look at a dashboard and I can predict the occupancy rate of any of my hotels in the year ahead. And so what we do is we look at, the current level of booking that's in that hotel. We can see what we did last year versus that. We can even know almost anonymously what our competitors are doing as well. So within our particular competitive space of a hotel, what are the hotels in our neighborhood doing and how are they performing as well? And based on that, we can then turn that into actual action. So we can say, do we reduce the price of the hotel rooms to drive more booking? Are we getting really busy? We can turn up the price a little bit. Do we need to market more heavily? And if we are going to market, how do we market and who do we market to? Because again, we've captured a huge amount of data about our audience. So where do they come from? How long do they stay? What sort of consumers are they? How far before the stay do they book? So I know, for example, that if I've got a need to fill Jumeirah at Etihad Towers, the second week of December, I can say to myself, who typically stays here? Maybe, for example, it might be guests from Saudi Arabia. Well, how far before their visit do they book? And we say, they come about 2 weeks before. So I know that 2 weeks before the middle of December, I need to start pushing marketing messages into Saudi Arabia or through my CRM channels to communicate to them. So the level of sophistication that we can operate at as a business now is incredibly high. The challenge for us is really to, one, continue to get better at it, but two, to really make sure we're maximizing those opportunities.
Thanks. It's great to see that hospitality is kind of ahead of the game maybe in this, but Carlos was saying also, of course, that even traditional retail has been doing this for some time with companies, supermarkets, and Raida, what you're saying, so even the more sectoral B2B organizations are getting on the data game. So let me come now to Amir. So you obviously working as head of analytics and insight at SAP. I mean, I guess part of your role is to help companies understand. So presumably you do this anyway, it's your day job, but you're also trying to help your clients understand the opportunity of data. How easy or difficult is that conversation to explain to people, given the complexity and the wealth of opportunities, to explain to them that data science is the way forward and can help them transform their business?
There's a term that I like to use, and I call it digital Darwinism. So you essentially need to embrace the change that's happening. The business models as we know it are changing, and they're changing exponentially. And we heard Carlos mention exponentially. But I want to just dig a little bit deeper into what that really means. An exponential move means a coupling. We, as from an education system, from a corporate system, we're used to linear systems. The linear system is 1 + 1 = 2 + 1 = 3. The digital revolution that's happening around us is bringing an exponential change, which is a coupling every step, which means 2, 4, 6, 16. So if you were to say, Amir, take 30 steps to get to the end of this room, you'll know that I'll get to the end of this room. If you say take 30 exponential steps, it would mean that I'd lap the world 26 times. This essentially is changing business models. This is why Uber has changed the transportation world upside down. Here's a company that essentially is an app, doesn't own a car, doesn't own a driver, but they're one of the largest and most profitable transportation companies in the world. So for us, as we sit down with our clients, we want to make sure that we can help them understand their customer experience, their customer's customer experience. If they're in the government, it's all about citizen insight and understanding the citizens and what the citizens require. If you're in the corporate world, we need to help you understand the customer's experience and what their expectations are. And big data, and here's my pet peeve, analytics needs to be a big part of that. It's all about the analytics and insight that you're able to gain to be able to bring predictability into your business and to create new services and new service models to drive the new economy that's being created. And here's where youth can have a tremendous impact, because they don't come in thinking the old way. They're coming in thinking about new services. And again, at SAP, I have to put a plug in for us here, is our focus, our mandate from our CEO is we make software to help improve people's lives. That's a critical core for us. So we want to make sure that the youth are engaged. They're helping develop and create these new business models that are out there. There's something out there called blockchain right now. I don't know if you know about it, if you've heard about it or not, but I believe that's going to help change things tremendously in the financial industries as we know it. So things are going to get faster, and businesses that do not adapt, they simply disappear. I'll just give a quick example of that. A brand that I grew up with, Kodak, the #1 market share in the world when you think about it. And in 1997, Kodak went out of business simply because they thought they were in the papers and chemicals business. Kodak was the company that created the digital camera in 1976 by Dr. Sassoon. But they said, hey, what is this stuff? This is a toy. We don't want to, we're in the papers and chemicals business. We want to make sure that we're creating papers and chemicals so people take pictures and we sell more of that. They forgot all about that. The same year they went out of business, a little company called Instagram came on board, and with 13 employees, they created 5 times the amount of revenues that Kodak ever did with 170,000 employees. So those are some facts to be taken into consideration when we talk about the digital revolution that's happening around us and how businesses need to be ready to innovate and change and create business models. And we at SAP are on the forefront to work with our clients to do that.
And of course, it's not just, you can potentially go out of business or become irrelevant, but it's the speed that it can happen overnight.
It's that coupling. It's that coupling that I talked about, because again, we're educated, and historically organizations, we're all thinking linearly. So think that mind shift, switching from linear to exponential is a huge leap. And this is where we need to grasp the gravity of the situation. It is estimated that more than 50% of the Fortune 500 companies are no longer going to be there within the next 10 years. And we see that reality happening before our eyes.
And we took a lot about how we don't even know what the jobs of the future are, which kind of makes career counseling for youth somewhat difficult. I want to take the opportunity to thank SAP for working with us at Emirates Foundation. So we've been doing a lot of trying to use data to measure our performance. We now have an aggregate scorecard, and I know that your team has been working with ours to really help us automate that as much as possible and maximize the efficiencies. I'd like you to think, and I'll come back to you around the where do you start question for the philanthropic sector, because I think some of this can be overwhelming, especially to some small social purpose organizations that there's an opportunity, but where do you start? As we talked before, do I need a chief data scientist tomorrow, or what's the starting point? So I'd like you to ponder that. I want to mention that we can take questions questions from the floor via the app. Someone's going to bring me the application now, so I will be looking any questions you have or comments. It would be great if you have examples of how your philanthropic organizations are already using data to improve impact, that would be great. And whilst we do that, I'm going to come now to Dariush, so our academic representative, but who also is very much focused on enterprise. And indeed, our panel today was looking at not just social impact, but of course, enterprise. We know that that is critical on the policy agenda in the region. It's certainly very important for us as we look at youth. How can we help young people become more entrepreneurial? What do we need in terms of ecosystem? And Dariush, you and I talked a little bit around how academia is changing on the back of data, how data science is becoming a growth area. And yet still perhaps there isn't that link between data and data science, understanding what people are doing out there in the market and what we are doing in terms of policy. How can we make that connection between economic policy, trying to promote things like enterprise, whilst also using an evidence-based approach?
Thank you very much for inviting me here. It may not come as a surprise that in academia we lag behind substantially, unfortunately. And speaking of lagging behind, let me just briefly talk about what the center that I direct at the Haas School of Business at Berkeley does. I am not a scientist, first of all. So I majored in political science and political economy, but as a wise man from the East once pointed out, any discipline that has the name of science in it, generally this is an indicator that it is not scientific. So speaking of lags, we have detected a major and fundamental lag in the context of the MENA region as well, in the sense that virtually all of the countries in the Middle East and North Africa have made tremendous strides in achieving the goals of social development. And by social development, I mean educating their population, raising literacy rates, improving public health, and expanding life expectancy, which is fantastic. And if you happen to be young or female, you have even made more strides in becoming literate and educated and healthy. But if we look at the economic dimension, unfortunately, in terms of achieving the goals of economic development, we have not been as successful, in the sense that we still are dominated by economies which are undiversified, not particularly competitive at the global level, not very productive, do not excel in creating jobs. And so the beneficiaries of social development are experiencing tremendous frustration in terms of achieving employment. And so a gap, tremendous gap, unfortunately, has developed. And this has led to rising frustrations, inability to obtain gainful employment, especially in the context of the Muslim world, means that frequently it's difficult to get married. You can't get married if you don't have a job. And if you don't have a job and a wife, then you cannot fulfill your biological requirements.
So do you think that gap is something that data can resolve? So if, for example, we know that most of the young people you're talking about, very young population, of course, in the Middle East, are very active in social media, for example. So you have a wealth of unstructured data out there in social media. So how can we make sure that the policy lag that you're talking about, where economic policy is not matching fast enough to cope with social needs, surely the fact that we know what young people are thinking, we know what the trends are now, because they're articulating them via social media, surely there's an opportunity there to use that data to better inform policy. Is that something is that the role of academics to drive that link? Is it the role of governments? Is it partnerships with the private sector? How do we nail that?
I think partnerships definitely have a role to play in terms of closing this gap that has developed. And what we do at our center basically is to try to promote entrepreneurship as a means of creating jobs. Because we believe that the most fundamental problem afflicting the region is the issue of youth unemployment as well as underemployment. So we provide entrepreneurship training, high-tech entrepreneurship training. We bring people to the Bay Area, to Silicon Valley, and we also go to different places in order to provide this training. And here, what we want to utilize data science is to assess the impact of our initiatives. To see, for instance, whether it makes a difference that people come to the Bay Area and are exposed to the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the Bay Area, whether that in itself will make a difference, or if they simply take an online class from UC Berkeley or Stanford or MIT, it will have the same impact.
Yeah.
Would it make any difference to come to the so-called Mecca of entrepreneurship, or does it make no difference whatsoever? Does the duration of the courses that are offered, does that make a difference, or does it not make a difference? If they come simply for a couple of weeks for a certificate program, or if they come for an extended period of one semester, maybe one academic year, does that make any difference?
Okay, let's come back to thanks. That's an important point. So how do we build the enterprise capacity on the one hand, and how do we understand what young people want? Yusuf, you do a lot, I think, outside of your day job in terms of promoting enterprise and being from the region, really wanting to encourage young people to think more entrepreneurially. Is the solution us reading more from what they're already telling us via social media, becoming the Jumeirah group of policy? Or is it about the kind of the more old school hands-on mentoring, access to Silicon Valley? How do you think we can use the data opportunity to support youth?
I think it works in two different ways. I think the really exciting thing for someone like me who kind of grew up in this digital space is the opportunities that are afforded to us within that context. I think in a part of the world that is still driven by very hard borders, by sectarianism, by a lot of different challenges that we have, there's this thing called the internet and data that really defies all these borders and creates all these opportunities. And that's why the greatest opportunities today in entrepreneurship and youth employment in large part are in the tech space, because these are things that can transcend borders and boundaries. And I think there's two areas of opportunity there. I think one is, I guess to answer your question, I think there's one in terms of, I think there is a role to take a look at the data and unlock it and see what it does. But I think in a lot of ways we already know how that works. I think the real opportunity is empowering and educating young people to see how they can actually take their talents and passions and actually run sustainable businesses with them. I think one of the interesting partnerships that we're seeing in the region now is these kind of public-private partnerships where entrepreneurship platforms are partnering with technology companies or big corporations, where the corporations need access to innovation, they need access to fresh ideas, to new perspectives, to what the youth are trying to do, but the youth are looking for large organizations to become their customers, to support them, or to give them the structure that they need to be able to build their businesses as well.
And are youth using data and social media platforms? So for example, one of the challenges for enterprise we know is accessing the supply chain, market links. Do you think that young entrepreneurs in the Middle East are, for example, better able to engage with a company like Jumeirah Group because they can get to you via social media, right? They have voice now, they have much greater voice.
Yeah, I think the way in which social media has brought down those barriers between the youth and governments or the youth and corporations is obvious, and it's been in front of us for years. It's just that the tools to be able to do that only ever seem to get better. And for us as a service business, this is something we have to look at very, very closely. I mean, the way in which forums like TripAdvisor today influence people's choices in terms of where they go to dine or which hotels they choose to stay in can't be understated. And so it's so important for us as a business to not only be present on social media, but to be listening and be reacting on social media. So if somebody's had a poor experience in a restaurant, in a hotel, if they make a particular claim, we have to be
can't hide.
You can't hide from it. And things like TripAdvisor will literally make or break your business as a hotel or as a restaurant today.
Yeah. So I want to come back to that. We talked a bit about the mentality. So I'm curious to know, a company like Uber, of course, it's in their DNA. They were built on the back of a digital revolution. How does a more traditional corporate like yours, obviously you've been good at adopting the data science thing, but how do you change mindset internally? And I'm thinking of some of our peers in the region, as foundations. Of course, a lot of foundations are run by very young people. A lot of the social enterprise we see in the region is young people. But how do we encourage people to think intrinsically that what we do, what our strategy is, what our programs are, should be evidence-based because we have access to that data? How do you make that shift?
Well, that's not a hard shift. First of all, our industry is based on evidence and data. So we've been using a lot of the data modeling softwares for construction and management. But I think seeing the value of how the existing data out there can better our strategic planning and growth planning, what do you want to grow, what clients we want to approach, I think that's key. But also, as an organization traditionally employing engineers, we don't have the talent capacity that allows us to actually take that data and turn it into insights. So one of the things that we do is we employ data scientists that understand our core business and how to actually extract and analyze data and turn it into insights for our engineers to be able to plan better. So that's one of the things. The other thing is definitely looking at the ecosystem of data and data analytics and data mining and partnering with the right companies. So there are companies that do this. There are companies that can complement the services that we offer, because we cannot turn into a data analytics company ourselves. That will be extremely expensive from an investment point of view. So looking at the data, it's better to actually partner with companies, that are out there within the ecosystem. But also hiring young people who are, savvy when it comes to technology, data, and the use of artificial intelligence in the way they do business every day. So let's be very, very candid here. We are all tracked as objects in this world of Internet of Things. So it's not just the Internet of Things and its people. Our behaviors, our sentiments are being tracked. That's why social media like Facebook is really good at profiling. When you go on your Facebook page, they actually suggest who you should be friending with, based on your behaviors. So taking that kind of strategic planning that companies like Facebook and Google do and applying it to the business is exactly where we want to be. So the talent gap, and this is where companies like us also can help the philanthropy sector by investing and partnering more with, like the likes of Emirates Foundation for more STEM support and helping young people understand the opportunities that lies within the data space in the future. So becoming a data scientist or becoming an app developer or becoming a strategic thinker based on insights, I think that's where we want to see. And as a company, we're doing that now. We're targeting, usually we employ people with experience. Now we're actually looking at young people who are extremely savvy in technology and can assimilate the ecosystem much faster to support our business and also talk to our clients and customers. At the end of the day, our world here in this part of the world, we're all young. We have a very young population, so you need to talk to the people based on their trends and based on what they want. And again, that's what we're saying, the voice of the people on social media. What do they want? When somebody says, I'm not happy with the way, I commute every day in the morning, well, okay, we listen to you. This is what the city is going to do. We're not happy with the quality of water. I don't want to live in a city that's contaminated, for example, that the air pollution is high. People track these things. Young people are tracking these things and they're expressing them. So our job is to take that and present it to the officials. But to do that is you invest in talent, you invest in your partnerships, and you invest in your digital infrastructure. And the other thing that we're seeing right now, we're doing this in the US through our foundation, is we're actually allowing the CSR sector to access the data that we gather, because that really helps. Data now is being seen as a currency of the future. So if for some of the social impact groups, they don't have the large cash investment to put in infrastructure. to be able to use analytics. So what we're doing is actually we're allowing them access to those analytics, we're allowing them access to this data, and to some of our platforms so they can use them and generate their own reports that they want based on their needs and future plans. So this is how we're actually bridging that gap with the with the philanthropic sector.
So is your CSR portfolio now being driven by data?
To an extent, yes. When it comes to STEM and girls in STEM, definitely it's driven by data.
So have you, for example, exited a traditional CSR program because data demonstrated that it wasn't working?
Well, we're aligning our investments in the US specifically around where we see more girls attending STEM disciplines, where more cities are actually focusing their entire educational systems around improving STEM-related discipline, girls attending STEM-related disciplines, for example. So we do work with the likes of Intel because they have a very strong reporting on young people attending, engineering and technology sectors from, starting from school up to college. So we're using that to realign our investment in CSR.
Great. And I wonder if, as you mentioned, maybe the solution is just hire young people because they are automatically more data savvy, or that may be too ageist. And do you have a chief data scientist at CH2M?
Well, we have a chief innovation scientist in our company.
Okay.
His name is Einstein. Very, very
His name's
funny.
Einstein?
Yes.
Not the Einstein, I presume.
No, not the Einstein, but kind of works.
Reincarnated. Great. I'm getting some good questions coming in. And Amir, one of these relates to you because we were talking earlier about where do you start. So if you're a small foundation or small social enterprise, and maybe you are already digitally savvy and you know there's an opportunity here, what should you do? Do you need to go out there and hire just young people, hire a chief data scientist? Is it looking at basic data, structured data in the beginning, and then looking to unstructured data? So if you can ponder that question, while I also read out another question from our friend Stephen King, which is that we talked about TripAdvisor. So he's asking, is there a social TripAdvisor? So could we create an online application that would, just like TripAdvisor assesses the hospitality sector, that assesses the philanthropic sector? And would SAP, Jumeirah, and Berkeley, and maybe CH2M also be willing to create one? So let's come to Amir first, and then I'm going to come back to the team for a response to that.
Thanks for that. So the initial stage always starts with your operational data, which is your internal data sources that you have. It could be your CRM, your ERP, that's your internal financial system. So you need to have a good grasp of that, and that's the foundation. You enrich that data with exogenous data coming either from third-party sources that could help drive to your mission. Could be data coming from UN, World Bank, etc. And then the other dimension would be the social media dimension, social media analytics dimension that could come in. So those would be the three pillars of data that you'd have to bring in and enrich with that specific cadence. Again, it depends on the organization, the size of the organization, and the mission at hand, and then those priorities could change a little bit. Now, you need to have a chief data scientist on the team? No, but you need to have a mission to make sure that you're using data to make your decisions. And you can outsource that type of data science decision making out to the cloud. There's a lot of companies out there, a lot of startups. One of them is, for example, Kaggle, which is you have data scientists on demand. So you have a problem you want to solve, you actually put it out to bid, and they go ahead and put a bid in for it, and then they solve that problem and come up with the trends for you. So there's a lot of different ways to go at it. We ourselves also engage a lot of smaller organizations as a part of our corporate responsibility to make sure that we're supporting as well with our expertise.
And indeed, that's largely what you're working on with us. So the message really is get your data house in order first, your kind of basic structured data, before you get too creative around kind of mining social media.
Yeah, absolutely. Because first, that's the main pillar, and that type of information needs to be.
Though you're mining social media already. If you think about the way Emirates Foundation, because our audience is youth, we use primarily social media to communicate. So. And we often feel that we're kind of proactively putting stuff out there into cyberspace, but are we reading enough of what we're getting back? And I think that's the challenge. How do we make sure that the data that we're getting back, we can capture and do something with it?
And that comes out to when you're putting data out there. For example, it could be in this form of a survey, because you want to make sure you get that information back. How surveys are designed is sort of an art in itself to get people and youth engaged enough to want to give their insight back. And there's a lot of different ways to design surveys. So that's one of the key ways to make sure you get the high response rate.
Unstructured surveys? So instead of us just surveying the 60,000 young people on our database, can we survey youth in general in the UAE?
Absolutely. And again, that really comes down to how you want to design the survey and what the goal of that survey would be on what type of data you want to capture from that survey. So that is also available, it's doable, and it's a way that's going to enrich your current operational data that I would say you'd have.
Great. Well, I hope you're going to help us with that as we move forward.
That's what we're here for.
Great. So let's come back to the TripAdvisor question then. Yusuf, is that something that you think maybe Jumeirah Group could, as an organization that's already leveraged this opportunity, could help with?
It's an interesting one. I think something like TripAdvisor works very easily because you're rating an experience or a transaction. So it's very easy to rate it from 1 to 5 stars or whatever it might be. When it comes to the context of measuring social impact of a program, it becomes a lot more difficult to actually say, oh, I had a 5-star experience, through the social impact of this program on my life or my community or whatever it might be. So it would be important to try to figure out what it is you could measure. But I think the need for any organization to measure their customer feedback, be it diners or guests in a hotel, or be it the beneficiaries of a social impact program, is very important.
But it must have an impact on funding, of course. So if we had a social TripAdvisor that, people who had engaged with Emirates Foundation, for example, said it was a 5-star, as a youth, it was a 5-star engagement opportunity, our proposition to potential funding partners is enhanced. So it could be very powerful from that.
I think that kind of that proof of concept, that social proof, getting people to give you that feedback on the impact you've genuinely had is very valuable. And if there was a smarter way to gather that using social media or an app, I think it'd be a really good step forward.
Dariush, what do you think of the idea of us using data to measure impact? So you obviously work with lots of organizations in the region that are looking at enterprise, building entrepreneurs, encouraging entrepreneurs. How do you evaluate the organizations you work with currently, and could you do more using data, social media even?
Actually, we have started what we refer to as the eco map in our center. And the purpose of the eco map is to map out the incubators and the accelerators and the angel investors and the VCs throughout what we refer to as the AMENA region, with the A referring to Asia and then MENA, Middle East, North Africa. So it's all good and well to map them out and to tell people where they are and how they could approach these institutions. But we also would like to come up with a mechanism for evaluating the quality of these incubators and accelerators. Because thus far, based on what we have discovered, there seems to be many scattered throughout the Middle East, and yet the impact that they're exerting has not been significant, so far as I can tell. So we need to look at the quantity, but also the quality, which also brings me to another issue, and that is that being an entrepreneur in the Middle East and North Africa is very different from being an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. And there are tremendous challenges. There are tremendous challenges in the Valley, with 70 to 90% of startups failing anyway. But in the Middle East, we have other obstacles in the form of institutional obstacles that we have to overcome. So that another index that my center is working on is an index that would look at the institutional factors which are indispensable and required for entrepreneurship to succeed and to prosper. For instance, we have to look at the legal structure and the regulatory structure and the bureaucratic structure and governance and so forth. In the legal structure, do we have laws that protect private property and intellectual property? And are these laws enforced properly? What about bankruptcy laws? If most entrepreneurs are likely to go out of business, then what is the state of bankruptcy laws in the Middle East and North Africa region? Are people penalized and put in prison if they fail? And then we have to look at labor laws. Obviously, it's easy to hire people, but what if you go out of business? Then how easy is it to fire people?
So those are some very interesting structural challenges that we talk about a lot in the region when we talk about youth and enterprise. So we talk about the ease of access to capital, ease of being able to register a business, the regulatory framework. Amir, back to you. What would be your advice as somebody who's coming from the very corporate analytics side? So an institution like the Haskell is looking at research and policy. How can they use data to advocate for a change in policy, for example?
Well, I mean, the data is all there. That it's going to show you the trends, where the trends are, and where you should be making how you should be basing your decisions based on those specific trends as it applies to your mission. I mean, that's really critical out there. So using the data that's out there that's provided by third-party sources, again, like the World Bank, like UN, or social media that's out there, all that can be harvested, coupled together with your internal data, and tie that into your mission to make the decisions to drive that specific investment forward. So,
are you working at all in that area with governments looking at policy advocacy based on big data?
Absolutely. With many of the governments in this region, we're engaged specifically around labor diversification, which areas of investment, in which pools of labor, what type of services should be focused on to make sure we're creating more jobs. So we're very focused on that area and working very closely with the government, many different governments in this region on that specific topic.
And do you have anything that focuses specifically on youth? Do you think there needs to be a shift in the way you communicate with the youth digital savvy population as opposed to those that are not?
Yes, we do. And actually, we look at this thing very comprehensively from SAP perspective. So in addition to engaging our clients in the government space, we ourselves, we have two other programs. One of them is our TDI program. It's called our Talent and Development Institute, where we work very closely with different government entities to make sure that we are identifying specific talent at an early stage, where we ourselves are helping them develop in countries, so in Saudi, in UAE, in Qatar. We're working very closely with different agencies and making sure that we're helping create analytical talent to make sure that there is a sustainable analytical talent that's going to help drive this forward. So that's one pillar of it. Another pillar would be our engagement in the small, medium enterprise community, where we're very focused on trying to make sure that we create a platform where youth is involved in coming in and getting engaged in different types of startup activities. And that's the other pillar that we're very much involved with.
And Raed, you're obviously working with us on our Think Science program, which is trying to encourage young people to study science and technology. Ironically, despite young people being digitally savvy, we see a decline in young people studying STEM and choosing to work in STEM. How do you think, as a corporate, that has helped you both attract talent, encourage talent to be STEM focused, and how does that impact your business strategy?
Well, I think there's a new trend, and I'm sure you're aware of it. STEM now, they've added arts into it, because arts coupled with engineering and technology disciplines help people become more, innovative and think outside the box, and help them see the potential of the applications. I think making it sexy, if you want, for the young people by showing them the examples of where this industry is going. Traditionally, engineering is becoming decline. Actually, that's a big issue globally as a company, and our competitors and peers are facing. We're going to have a shortage of engineers in a few years' time. There's not enough engineers to actually maintain the infrastructure or create new infrastructure in the world. So that's definitely, and that's why we're working with companies like Intel to actually gather the data and look at where do you have the highest percentages of young people going to STEM disciplines, and why are they doing that? Is it because there are social programs like Emirates Foundation are doing the promotion and encouraging them? Is it educational reforms that are happening? Is it funding? happening? Is it the presence of large technology companies in that area, like Intel and IBM? Is it creating that kind of interest? And is it simply just, basically cultural issues? Because you see in some of this part of the world, families like their kids to go to science-related disciplines, become engineers and doctors. So looking at that data and taking the trends that are helping young people come join STEM programs and try to replicate them somewhere else through our foundation and other foundations as well. So definitely making it more sexy and understanding why the decline is. And that's where you really need to mine for the right data, because this is not data you can find on social media. This is not data that you can find anywhere. You have to look for it. You have to look for it in educational institutions. You have to look for it through social programs and foundations, and try and analyze it in a way and look at the trends. And this is what Amir was talking about, trend analysis. It is a whole science behind this, and we are very much engaged in this with a few companies, like I said, in the US, and trying to understand that, because we do have a serious challenge running out of engineers in a few years' time. I know the UAE would need about 30,000 engineers to actually deliver on all of its strategic plans and visions, whether it's Vision Abu Dhabi 2030. All of this, you need to really examine the underlying effects why this is happening, whether it's the pay issue, whether it's the opportunities where because if you hire an engineer on a site, that's not really attractive unless you really love engineering and love to do what you want to do. For our youth in this part of the world, they have a lot of choices. And not necessarily, going to a STEM discipline will get them a job. They have jobs. Some of them, like in the UAE and Qatar, they have a lot of opportunities, not necessarily like people, let's say, in Lebanon or Syria. So the trends do matter, and how you address this shortage, if you say, in young people attending STEM disciplines.
It seems a rather bizarre dichotomy that on the one hand you have a young generation that is digital savvy. We say that the future lies around data science, artificial intelligence, and yet we have a decline in mathematicians and engineers. So maybe I'm going to ask Yusuf why that disconnect. You work with young people as well. Why is it that we have digitally savvy young people and yet they are not studying the subjects that will allow them to really leverage the digital revolution?
I don't know. It's an interesting question. I think I'm hopeful that it's a trend that's going to reverse, because I think a lot of people see today the opportunity for technology to help people break out of a lot of these cycles of a lot of these economic cycles. I think this is especially true when you look at countries, like the Levant, where they really see these opportunities now for them to be able to kind of break out and use technology in that way. I think, governments have a responsibility to encourage people to study more of this. I mean, you look at countries like Estonia, where they have things like Project Tiger, where computer literacy, actually computer programming literacy, has actually been built into the curriculum. So 12 years from now, they will have a 100% literacy of citizens who are computer programming literate, not just computer literate. So you think, what can a population achieve when anybody can program? It's mind-boggling, what the potential is. I really don't know what the answer is to that question, but I think the trend is changing.
And we do, of course, now we're seeing that in schools, children are being taught to code, even in nurseries. So perhaps that's part of the solution. Is it that the education system hasn't caught up with the market fast enough?
Yeah, I think so in a lot of ways. And I think the sad reality is quite often we're still losing our best and brightest to other places in the world. I remember seeing a minister in Lebanon give a speech once. He goes, the Lebanese only can export one thing, which is our people. And it's really unfortunate, that the best and brightest quite often still choose to go live elsewhere. For me, as a person who grew up in the Middle East, and I've called the UAE home for the last 20 years, I think it's really nice to see there is really one country that is a bit of a shining light in this part of the world where you can actually find gainful employment and build a career. And unfortunately, there's just not too many examples of countries like the UAE in the region today.
Indeed, they're pioneering in that space. Dariush, you wanted to comment on that point around choosing those academic subjects given the opportunity.
I'd like to comment by saying that obviously it depends upon the country. In some countries, as you say, the study of STEM is on the decline, but not in others. For instance, the country from which I originally come from, which is Iran, there is an abundance of engineers and scientists.
Even now? Even the new generation?
Especially amongst the new generation. So there are about 4.5 million students who are enrolled in college and university at the moment, and a significant proportion of them are studying STEM. And then in terms of why people are not turning to science and math and so forth, for the obvious reason, I think that the way in which it is taught is horrible. It's
not applied enough, often we see.
It is not fun. It undermines creativity. It undermines innovation. You're forced to engage in rote memorization. So the curriculum has to change. And the way in which students are engaged has to be altered in order to make them interested in these fields. And you also need to have role models who would be familiar or should be familiar to these students. People who have studied math and science and engineering and who have succeeded tremendously and are being highly impactful, making a good life for themselves and giving back to the community. And these people should be celebrated and put on a pedestal
so
as
we really
role
need
models.
to make that connection between, as you were saying earlier, kind of the Silicon Valley type environment, so young people understand the opportunity. I have some more questions from the floor here, so I'm going to ask you all this one rather than put it to someone in particular. But how would a social enterprise find data that would help them make essential business decisions? So where would be the starting point? I mean, some of you are looking at it from a corporate perspective, but where do I start? If I'm a startup social entrepreneur, what do I do first? Maybe that goes to you, Amir. First.
I mean, it depends on your mission, right? I mean, that's really critical because it's a very broad question. So for me, it's always, it depends on the mission. And once you know your mission, you find your data sources that help support the mission that you want to drive. And then you leverage that data. There's abundance of data out there, but I mean, that's really the only answer I have because if it was a little bit more specific, I could hit on it a bit more specifically, but it depends on the mission that you have and then identifying the data sources that are going to help support that mission. So maybe a good example, for example, could be if youth education is a hot topic for you. I mean, you want to focus on youth education. At what sector do you look at, and how do you make sure that STEM becomes, for example, you create an awareness around STEM to make sure you're attracting more youth into STEM. How do you do that? And then you need to identify what are the types of ways that you can teach STEM, as Darsha was saying earlier, that would get kids to be more attracted towards it. Right now, yeah, math is hard. It's very simple, right? Everybody remembers your first calculus class, right? It's tough stuff. It's hard stuff. And it's easier to say, well, look, I'm gonna stay away from that and go and study something that's a little bit easier and slide into some kind of business. But the reality is we need to push our kids more towards that side and let them know that they will have some kind of personal and professional gratification out of taking the tougher courses. And it goes back into also making sure that we do have those folks that they can look up to, as Darsha was saying earlier. I think that's really, really critical. I'm going to give you a personal example, actually. I volunteer for a nonprofit organization in the UAE. It's called the Emirates American Football League. And here we have 500 athletes all the way from 9 years old to 15 years old. And we're using this platform to teach them data-driven decision-making, using the athletics platform to see if they're active. Doesn't matter how big you are, how small you are, what age you are, and we measure and manage their activities on the field and give them feedback, so to help them change their lifestyle, to help them look forward. Now, the underpinning of everything, that exercise that we do with them, is mathematics. So now they have a better understanding, a better love for mathematics. And that's sort of a long-about way of answering that question.
But, and it's still kind of ironic because you still hear that if you're a maths graduate in 2016, you are likely to have a job for life, correct? Maybe that's a broad assumption. But so one would think that the professional opportunity is clear, that albeit it's a difficult subject, but that you're less likely to face unemployment challenges in the future.
Absolutely, I can tell you, anybody who's got a very high math score, I mean, as long as he has some social skills as well, but you're going to be very employable.
So I've got a couple more questions from the floor, and then I'm going to ask each of you to just give one tip, please, to our friends in the room here, philanthropists, foundations, on how to maximize the opportunity of the digital revolution. But actually, the question really to you, Raida, well, maybe also Yusuf, how can the private sector support in providing data for youth projects? So is there data that you have access to, for example, around smart cities, that you think, wow, this would make a great social impact program that you can share?
So I don't know how many of you have heard about the initiative by Dubai, which is the big data project. So it's the most ambitious, biggest project around open data, which means they're gathering data and allowing both government and the private sector and the social sector access to that data. So it's got to be structured in a way that it's easier for you to look for data if you're looking at starting a project with a social impact. For us, we're actually using the data that we gather for our insights, and we're routing those data to that project. So this is an initial partnership. We're doing the same in the US. When you work with your peer companies, you actually need to exchange data for better planning and better provisional planning for projects. On projects like the London Olympics and on major events that we do around the world, again, we need to share data with the public on what's going on. So opening the data portals, and all you can do is actually ask if that data is available or not. Some companies I know, they've opened innovation rooms where entrepreneurs can come in and use their resources around governance, around legislations. That's also data. If you're a social entrepreneur and you want to start in this part of the world, Thomson Reuters has an innovation room that you can go in and access all these data for free. So companies are figuring out how to actually provide that data for social entrepreneurs. In our industry, it's a bit hard, but with initiatives like the big data in Dubai and others starting all over the world, I think it'll be easier for us to share that kind of information as well.
Great, thank you. You've also touched on some of the question around how the role of government. So I'm going to ask each one of you now, so starting with Dariush, what is the one thing that you would suggest that a social purpose organization like a foundation should do to maximize the opportunity of data in the digital revolution?
I'm going to answer that question, but before I do, I just want to point out that it is not necessarily the case that if you study math and that your grades are good, you're assured a good job.
Okay.
Maybe in the UAE that is the case, but unfortunately in some of the other countries of the region and beyond, it is not the case. And actually the best and the brightest become a part of the brain drain. So maybe if you get up and leave your country and go to the Bay Area and get a scholarship at Stanford or Berkeley, then yes, definitely, you will find a fantastic job. And I also want to point out that those countries in the developing world that have succeeded in building a flourishing entrepreneurial system have also one thing in common, and that is that they have managed to some extent reverse the brain drain and to build a bridge between their expatriates living in the United States, Canada, Europe, and the native country. So another fundamental question is how they have managed to build this bridge and what conditions need to prevail in the mother country in order to persuade those
to retain
who have
the
left to either return or it's unlikely that they would return. However, they could become a part of what is referred to as the brain circulation. So they go back and forth and they bring their networks and their experiences and their skills and their money back to their native country and then go back maybe to the adopted country.
Thank
you.
So
I think definitely that we should invest in, if we have the resources, in hiring a data scientist. Because it's absolutely essential and indispensable, and we're going to miss the boat if we don't. Or if we don't have the resources, at least to partner with other charitable institutions who are willing to share.
Well, and maybe even with academia and with the private sector. Yusuf, what would be your top tip? And just think a little bit when you answer how we connect educational reform and preparing young people for the digital age.
I think for any smaller social enterprise that's getting started, I think my advice is kind of just start small. You know, be realistic about what you can do. You know, if you're a small charitable organization, just run a good, clean CRM database of donors, of interested parties, and communicate with them efficiently and regularly. Like, this is ABC stuff. It's not particularly expensive. And kind of once you've got that, then kind of build on top of that. Even for us as a 15,000 employee organization, when we looked at redeveloping our complete data platform 2 years ago, even we had to be let's start small. Let's be realistic. Yeah. Let's look at our data. Let's clean it up. And then let's start getting clever and actually doing and building on top of it. So start small, be realistic, and build your ambition over time.
Get your data house in order first. That's great. Thank you. Raida?
I would say invest in partnerships within the digital ecosystem. So as a private sector company, like I said, we cannot put our money and invest in a complete solution around data and digital revolution. So we're partnering. And I think that applies also to the social sector. So instead of looking at, if you want to start small, that's great. But if you are a bigger organization and you want to use big data and you want to invest in analytics and reporting and trend analysis, that's very expensive. So I think look at the partnerships and look at the philanthropy, not just through grant giving, but also through partnering with organizations that can provide you the services around big data analytics and trend analysis.
Great. And finally for you, Amir, if you can incorporate into your top tip, also just touch on, which we didn't get a chance to do, data privacy. So how can social sector organizations do this, get better at using data, but also making sure that they don't compromise the privacy of their beneficiaries?
Sure. So just to add on to because I think the partnerships absolutely is a critical part of it, but if you're a small organization just getting set up now, it's critical for you also to find some industry leaders that will be advisors to you, get them to believe in your cause and really invest some of their time with you. You will learn a lot from them, and they will help you a lot with their network as well. So I think that's also very critical, as you should create a board and put some people that really believe in your cause and will be able to help you that way. Data privacy, yes, that's a big topic, and governance, risk, and compliance comes with that. So there's a immense amount of responsibility that goes with that. Any data that's shared should always be anonymized. We want to make sure, and anytime we share data, it's anonymized. We never share any of our clients' data ever. That's up to our clients to want to touch that. Even if we go on site and we touch anybody's data, we are very much responsible for that. So there's a myriad of different types of technologies out there and processes and systems in place right now that help govern that. And we see actually laws in the UAE becoming very, very good in helping manage that environment. So fortunately, we have the legal infrastructure in place now to help enforce that, and the technology is there and is becoming even more robust. So from a data privacy perspective, that continues to be a very, very hot topic. I don't think a month passes without us hearing about some kind of data breach. I think we talked about the U.S. elections earlier today. I think somehow emails are appearing and disappearing in steadfast fashion, and they can't control it at that level. Just think about that. That's a fortress over there.
Yeah.
So if you're any type of organization, your data is your asset. It's the most important asset that you have, and that you just need to make sure you have the systems and the processes and the technologies in place, and thankfully you have a legal structure here in place that helps protect that as well.
Great. Well, thank you to all of you for giving us very practical insights on how we can work as the third sector with you all. Dariush from the Haas School of Business, great to have your thoughts on policy, how we can connect data to policy and really help to drive enterprise in the region. Yusuf, great advice on really making sure you've got your basic CRM in place and then get more ambitious, and great to hear actually how you really deploy that information for changing your business strategy. And Raida, great to hear from you, CH2M, on how you look at kind of the macro macro picture and how you're working with youth to both encourage STEM. I think that's also a message we put out regularly, that we need to partner with the private sector if we are going to support youth in becoming entrepreneurial. And Amir, thank you so much to you. I'm sure you're going to get lots of people coming now to ask for even more specific advice, both on data privacy and really, starting this journey with data science, and perhaps how you read 650,000 emails in 10 days. But we'll come back to that. So a big thank you to all of you. Do stay with us, and we have a coffee break now, so any of you want to engage with the panelists further, I'm sure they'd be happy to do so, and look forward to reconvening in half an hour, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you.